Hello and welcome to another Demi-Helen tutorial. This is going to be answering a question from a recent comment about how to apply reverb, how it's used on a trance synth. Now there is no proper and ultimate way to do it. It's all, as I always say, depending on the track you are making. But I'm just going to demonstrate how I go about it because it does matter where it's placed in the chain, depending on how you're wanting to affect it. So, first of all, we're just going to record some chords just for this sequence. So let me just think of something quickly. See, that sounds quite nice. Right, we'll have that. That's pretty nice. Right, just move the wires out of the way. I've got some wires. Right. Okay, so let's just get rid of some of that. We don't want that bit. Oh, we don't want that bit or that bit. We're just going to tidy this up quickly. Right. So we've put that there. Should we use triplets? No, we'll use. We'll keep it a straight rhythm for now. So. Alright, so as you can hear, there is already a lot of reverb on this, and this is from Massive, the preset I always built. As you know, I always use Pluckstars and Pluckstars Heaven. You can download it in some previous videos. I'll stick it on screen right now, somewhere with a card. So if you just look at the effects here, I've got delay and reverb. So usually you kind of avoid the built-in things unless you know what you're going to be doing later on, because if you're throwing reverb on it now, you're throwing reverb on all the frequencies right down to the very low, and it'll start getting very muddy and mashy. So usually I would tend to avoid it, but stuff like this I know how I'm going to manipulate it a bit later on. So if we go to the inserts and we just get an EQ to visualize what's happening, there is a lot of bass in this section. So if we just remove the reverb, just here is not quite getting over the top. So if we put that there just as a marker, put reverb back on, it's getting closer to that line, so it does add and emphasize the harmonics in the sound, which is kind of what reverb is. So it might be only very slightly, but it does affect it enough. So just to tidy this up, we're going to roll the bass off at 20 Hertz. Just get rid of any of those unwanted frequencies. And I'm just going to pop that up there and just cut that middle slightly at the boxy end. So that's just a quick bit of processing. Now, if I was to put reverb on after, if we just use the built-in Roomworks again, we'll just put the pre-delay there, reverb time to like 3, nearly, it's just under 4. And the size to about there. Increase the highs. So we've added that little bit of extra reverb, and if we make that a little bit more obvious by turning this off, there's not much there, but it does enhance. Now, in fact, for demonstration purposes, let's go into the reverb there, turn it off, and we're going to accentuate the reverb that I have put on here, and we're going to do a couple of different scenarios. Okay, so say that's the reverb that we want, we're happy with it. If we put that in first, and then EQ it, we've still got bass reverb. Now say I wanted to cut it to here, The reverb's still affecting this section, which is kind of affecting this slope here where it tails off. Obviously can like make it a bit more surgical, but music's not always about surgical procedures. So the reverb is affecting the lower notes and already kind of muddying the sound up. So if you want to avoid that, cut it first and then put the reverb on and you'll get a different sound, but you won't really notice. It'll just alleviate some of the headroom for kind of mixing and mastering. So if we listen to it after, can you hear how it affects it slightly different? That sounds really clean, and there's some artifacts in the bottom end. Just keep listening to that over and over, you will hear it. So usually I do kind of clean up how I want the sound to sound. So if this is going to be a supporting synth and it doesn't need really much bass, it's just there for definition, I'll kind of roll off up to the point where it's needed, then put the reverb on and kind of merge it like that. Then you've got to think ahead for, there's compression, depending on how you want to control the sound, if it's needed, whatever. But also you've got to take into consideration side chaining, or kickstarters we're going to use here. Now, listening to this sound, that is side chaining the sound and the reverb. If you put the reverb after, you get that tail off into the bits that are cut off, because the reverb's coming in after. So it's depending on what sound you're wanting to make. If you're wanting the whole thing to sound quite sharp, you're going to go in front of it. If you want to make it really obvious that you've put that side chain in there. So its placement really does matter in the mix. Now, if you're wanting it a bit tailing off after it, you're going to put it after that kickstart. So at least you're getting, obviously when you take it to a level that's a bit more transparent, as opposed to before, it becomes less transparent and you can tell that there's a side chain going on. Whereas there, because it bleeds into this like silent section, it gives less definition on the side chaining, not really drawing your attention to that side chain. It's more natural sounding is the way I'm actually looking for. So it really does depend. You can't just flood the sound with reverb. It doesn't always work like that. You've got to do it creatively, and you've got to do it at the same time with some kind of precision. You've got to know what you're doing with that reverb and how you want it to affect, because it can easily just take over a track and it become very difficult to put back into position. So I'll put in the reverb on there. Let's just take it away a few times. So it sounds a lot cleaner without that built-in reverb. So for this particular track it sounds a little bit more organic and natural. Put that on. You've got all these artifacts happening all over the place, but I can hear them in the lower end in my headphones. That sounds more clean but not surgical. So if we now go and add, what can we add into here? We'll add a Nexus patch, Trance Leads, Bass Drive 2, and we'll put the filter mod cut off low. Alright, so let's keep it there. Let's create a rolling bass, just a very, very simple one to demonstrate. So if we put that right across to there, and then that goes up to the D sharp. Right, let's get rid of those. And I'm just going to reduce the volume on here for now. Okay, so now we can hear that the synth doesn't really need too much bass in it, so we could roll it off a bit more. Because that bass line has got quite a lot of mid-range in there. It's always a good place to start. So you can hear how the sound develops. If you wasn't going to have that and you're just going to have like a nice sub-bass, then you're going to need more bass, more lower bass, lower mids in there to kind of beef up that synth. But especially in this case, I'm going to support it with another synth just for the demonstration. So the reverb is giving a lovely kind of spacious space in the track for it to sit, setting it far apart from the bass line, which is kind of what you want to do. You want to create an environment for your song to live in, just like you do in a big building. When you shout, it'll echo, and you go in a smaller one, it will echo, but it'll be a lot tighter and quicker. So depending on how you want the track to be perceived, you need to take that into consideration before you start. But if I don't know if I have any users here. We'll use that. It's nice and dry. Okay, so we're just going to record this in. Okay, so let's just tidy that up a little bit. Let's just do this quickly. Alright, so yeah, that'll do. So that's sounding quite dry, so we're going to have to add, and just for quick purposes we'll copy this reverb here. Let's make the size a bit bigger and the time a bit longer. That sounds quite nice. Now let's just listen to that. Right, so we've created a space for it to live in, but we still have to shape it because that synth really sounds, the pad sounds really out of place compared to the actual other two instruments. Okay, so you can see a lot of it's cut off already, so I'm just going to put a cut in here and sweep it across till it sounds right. There, the upper mids. So I'm just going to reduce that because we don't want it to be too harsh. So, put the reverb after Roomworks. It's affecting this range here and emphasising some of the harmonics in there, but we want to kind of reduce them harmonics, so we put it in before, so we're not cluttering this space up and letting this synth breathe when it actually comes in. So these two reverbs are set at different settings, but they kind of occupy the same space, if that makes sense. It's like one instrument is a lot closer to you as hearing and one's further away, so it sounds like there's more of a reverb. So you're setting the two apart just using reverb. Now, one other thing that's not making sense is it's kind of just sitting on there in big long notes. So let's wait for this to come back in. Right, so it's sounding a bit too kind of stop-starty. So we're going to chuck in the reverb after. So you're getting that tail into the cut-off bit here, and it sounds less computerized and sounds more natural. Let's put kickstart after. It's more defined. Less defined and smoother. Obviously, if you want that kind of effect, you put in kickstart after the reverb. It's entirely up to you. The same goes for delay and chorusing and stuff like that. Anything that can kind of leak in, it'll help smooth it out or stiffen it up, whichever way you want it to go. So the relation between sounds and the reverb has to be mutual, but doesn't have to be the same, as you can see with the particular preset here and here. Let's just get this one back up. So that's the second one, that's the first one. You can see that the reverb time is a lot shorter but a lot longer here, and I've just tweaked a few things, kept the mix the same just for like purposes of this experiment for you guys to see. Even though they're at different settings and sound different, they still relate to each other in terms of like kind of size, and it's giving that space. The pads always need to flow a little bit and sound huge, but you don't want to overdo it. You just need to do it so it's just there. Usually I would advise putting them in a send channel, so you're putting them on an effects channel and then sending it to that. You have more control over the wet and dry then. But as an effects chain, I choose to do it kind of that way around, unless I want it really defined. It just makes it sound more natural, and then compression will come in if you are, for example, I know this one is going to get really loud. So compression is going to need to be in there to set a roof level to stop it going so ear-piercing in the headphones, to kind of keep it under control, but not squashing it so it sounds squashed, just to control it. And everything else is down to creativity, but that is kind of how I would do things with the reverb. I would use the internal and then kind of shape it from there using the built-in EQ, so we're not getting too much low end out, but then process it from thereafter as well. So if you can do a bit of inside processing, you're alright in a sense, but you put in reverb right at the front of the effects chain. Sometimes it's not where you need it. If you keep doing that, you find out there's a lot of muddy artifacts, and the reverbs in some of the synths aren't the best. They're just there for reference really and for ease, but you can make use of them. So I really do hope this has kind of answered your question. From the comments in the last video, I'll put your name on screen now, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.